So we learned the Gemara yesterday that the Shosh Shagdim Yisrael Nasa Nishma, when the Yidden said Nasa Nishma, and they said Nasa before Nishma, when angels came down from heaven and gave them two crowns, one connected Nasa and one connected Nishma. So we understand from this that just saying Nasa alone deserves a crown, and just saying Nishma alone also deserves a crown. And then we said there's another method that says there were actually three crowns. That's because in addition to these two things, there's a third thing, and that is that Nasa comes before Nishma. There is a possibility to say Nasa and to say Nishma, but the Nishma comes before the Nasa. So the greatness of the Jewish people at that time was that they said Nasa and they said Nishma, but they also said the Nasa before the Nishma. So, like I said, that this is really something that is very broad, very vast, a lot of details, a lot of Maimorim, and we'll just give a Nakuda, which is sort of the main Nakuda, and then there are branches out to thousands of details. The main Nakuda is this. If a person would, the difference between Nasa and Nishma means basically they announce their commitment to Torah. This was the marriage between Hashem and the Yidden, thank you. And the Yidden announced and declared their commitment to Hashem. And they said these words, we'll do everything you tell us of Nishma and we'll listen. We explained yesterday, in this context, listen doesn't mean listen with the ears. Listen means we will also learn to understand. You find many times in Torah, the word Shema means to understand, to comprehend. In fact, that's what Shema Yisrael means. And also in other languages, in English, when someone tells you, I hear you, when you're having a conversation, they say, I hear what you're saying. They don't mean to say, I hear you physically, it reached my ears. It means I hear your point, I get it, I understand what you're saying. So, what would be wrong to serve Hashem with seichel, with logic, with understanding? After all, Torah is emes, and it makes perfect sense. In fact, it's more emes than any other logic in the world. So, what would be wrong to serve Hashem with nishma? So we know that the problem with that is that intellect and logic is not purely objective. It's very much influenced by our own personal interests. It's a subconscious thing, it's subtle. We don't feel it openly. Many people who do things that are extremely destructive convince you, and they actually convince themselves that their intentions are pure and they're doing it only for Hashem alone. But really, it's personal interest that's motivating them. Like the Rebbe Rashab writes in the Maimer, Hicholzu, some of you learned the Maimer, that unfortunately, in many communities, there are big arguments about who should be the Rav, who should be the Sheikhet, who should be in charge of the shul, what the shul should be like. People are arguing, they get into very big fights, and everyone argues and says that the reason why I'm putting up such a big fight is not personal, it's because I want the best for Hashem. That's what the community needs. It's about the community, not about me. As a result of all this fighting, they destroy whatever project was meant to be, and they don't get it. If you're really concerned about the community, how are you allowing this whole project to fall apart? But it's either it's going to be my way or otherwise everything will fall apart. Why? Because the real motivation is really personal interests. But it's not black and white. So in my mind, it appears to me that it's all for the purest of reasons. So therefore, logic is something that can be trusted. One of the examples that I gave to this is that, to me, it appears to be one of the most powerful examples I've ever seen. And that is that we know in the Jewish calendar, there are 2 months, 2 others, but not every year, every few years. And now the calendar is fixed. You can know in advance when there's going to be 2 others. Years ago, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, the Chachamim, the sages, would have to sit down and discuss, assess the situation. There are reasons why we make it a second other. One of the main reasons is because we want Pesach to come out in the spring. So they have to sit down, calculate certain things, and based on those calculations and based on that assessment, they will decide, should we make 2 others or 1 other? So every year they had to do this. Before other came, naturally, they had to make that decision. Then it says, of course, who are the ones that make the decision? These are the sages, the Bezdin. However, there are 2 people that are disqualified from being part of this decision. One of them is the king, and the other one is the Kohen Gadol. The king, what is the difference? Which way it'll be? Very simple. If there are 2 others, then it means that Pesach will be in a time that it's warmer, and all the other months coming will be in a time that it's warmer. If there's 1 other, then the months of Adar, Nisan, everything will be in a colder season because it's closer to the winter. There's only 1 month. So the king has to do with wars. Okay, that we can understand. But the Kohen Gadol, this is what it says about the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is supposed to immerse in the mikveh 5 times. That mikveh is on top of a certain chamber, and which is really on the outside. And basically, if it's cold, it's uncomfortable. If it's warmer, it's more comfortable. When he decides that this year there'll be 2 others, if there's 2 others, that means Yom Kippur will be in a warmer weather. If there's 1 other, it'll be in a colder weather. And therefore, subconsciously, that might influence his decision whether there should be 2 others or 1 other. Instead of making the decision based purely on what's the most appropriate, according to Torah, it'll also involve his personal interest, whether the water is going to be colder or warmer. So the Rebbe says, think for a moment what we're talking about. It's not about something that's happening now, because now we're making the decision before other. So it's about something that's going to be in 7 months from now. And in 7 months from now, it's not a matter of life and death. It's not a matter of health and not health. It's not a matter of going into freezing water. It's a question of whether the water will be a little bit, temperature will be a little bit higher or a little bit lower, but the weather will be colder or warmer. But because it could make a difference in how he's going to feel, he's disqualified because subconsciously that will influence his decision whether there should be 2 others or 1 other. And who are we talking about, by the way? The Kohen Gadol. And what are we talking about? The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. What is he thinking about, whether it'll be colder or warmer? What do we see from this? We see from this that whoever says, I'm not like that, I don't have to worry about it. I'll be able to concentrate and think about things purely. Nobody is exempt. Everybody's human, and that's just the way the brain works. The brain is influenced by personal interests. And therefore, I can't trust my intelligence. Yes, if I'm thinking in a way that's very general, objective, I know, let us steal, let her do this, now let her do that. You have to do this and you have to do that. But then when there's something that's going to come up that's going to make a difference to me, either a loss or a gain financially, or a loss or gain in something emotionally, or a loss and a gain in something which is physically relevant. In those cases, I can no longer trust my logic. So logic is not good enough. Therefore, there has to be nasa. What's nasa? Nasa means I will do. And that means a total commitment, unconditional commitment. Whether I do understand, whether I don't understand, I'm following Hashem. And then you're safe. Because you just looked at the Torah, see what the Torah says. It makes no difference whether it makes sense to me or not. I'm totally committed to those words. So even in the case where I'm personally going to have a loss, or I'm personally going to have a gain, I'll still do the right thing because I'm not following logic, I'm following nasa. However, with nasa and nishma, there's still a possibility that yes, I have unconditional commitment, but the unconditional commitment itself is based on logic. And then the unconditional itself is not unconditional. So what has to be is nasa first. First is first, I mean, not chronological, but in my head, in my emotion. First is an unconditional commitment. I nailed it in. I am doing what it says in Torah, regardless whether I'm winning or losing, gaining or making a profit or having a loss in any way whatsoever. And after that, I will use my logic to understand what the Torah says. And using my logic to understand what the Torah says, I will now be confident that my logic will go in the right direction. Because my logic is not going to be the one to determine whether I have a loss or a gain. I already made up my mind, I'm doing this. There's a famous mashal, which it must have come up in class before, but it's also relevant, so I'll mention it again. And that's the famous mashal with the person who went to visit a certain town, and found hundreds of trees. They had on the tree drawn a target, and in each target there was an arrow, and in every tree and every target, the arrow was right in the center, the bullseye. And he was thinking to himself that whoever did this must be an extremely talented person. Every single one to get it so accurate, so precise. So he went to find out who it was, and he finds out it was a young kid. I was really fascinated. And he sat down with him. How do you do it? How many years did it take you? Who taught it to you? What was the technique that you developed this talent? And the kid said, well, I'll tell you the truth, I just do it different than other people. Most people, what they do is first they draw the target on the tree, and then they shoot the arrow. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. I do it differently. First I shoot the arrow in the tree, then I draw the target around it, and it always comes down in the right place. What's the mashal? The mashal is that if I'm shooting the arrow, which is logic, sometimes I'll get it, sometimes I won't. If I have personal interest one way or another, I might not get it. My logic will take me off the right path. But if I'm doing it unconditionally, which means the arrow's in, 100%, I'm committed to what it says in the Torah. And then I start to think with it logically. Once I'm committed, my logic will lead me in the right direction to understand what Hashem said and what the Torah says. The only question is, why do we need logic? If logic is something which could mislead me, then wouldn't it have been better to leave logic out? So we mentioned this yesterday, and you mentioned something I want to just elaborate on that a little bit. The general inyan is that without logic, then my commitment to Torah and my embracing Torah, involvement in Torah is what we call makif. It's not in a deep, pneumistic way. In other words, the only thing that has a deep internal effect on a person, that really penetrates deep into my personality, into my psyche, whoever I am, that's logic. To give the example, if someone is doing something wrong, let's say a child or even an adult, and you want them to change, anything that you do which comes from the outside for them to change would never be a full, complete, proper change. So for example, if you threaten them that if they do this again, they're going to get a severe punishment and they change, they truly change. It's not a real change because inside they're still the same person. They're afraid of the threat, and that's why they're not doing this. What if it's a reward? Now they're doing it happily, but they're still doing it happily because of the reward. If you would take away the reward, they would have no interest in doing it again. So it's also not a change. And I'm thinking to myself, even if you would do something like hypnosis, hypnotize somebody and change the way they think, it's also not a true change. It's because you're hypnotizing them. And if that would they would snap out of that, they go right back to who they were before. So how in the world could you make a true change in a person? Let's say they respect you, so they're listening to what you say. Is that a true change? Also not. They respect you, or they're intimidated by you, so they listen to you. But it's not a true change. The only way a true change can take place is if someone says something that registers, it resonates with your brain, it makes sense, you understand it, and your seichel affects your way you feel. It makes sense to you that this is the right thing, that this is the wrong thing, and that's what motivates you to do it. When that happens, that's you, in the full sense of the word. So the only way that the Torah could penetrate the pneumius, really go into my essence and my personality, and this becomes my way of perceiving things, my value system, a way of understanding, and that's why I feel the way I feel, that's only through learning and understanding. So we need both. But I'll tell you what the difference is, even though we have both. When we say Nasa before Nishma means that even though I'm learning and I'm understanding, and of course this is something which is a little bit risky, it's like walking on a tightrope. I'm learning, I'm understanding, I'm looking for the reason, but at the same time in my head, what's motivating me to look for the reasons because Hashem wants me to know the reason so I can internalize it, but not that my commitment depends on the reason. There's a beautiful, beautiful explanation from the Friedrich Rebbe. The Rebbe mentioned this often about the Gemara, where the Gemara says, Kachi this is the way the Yetzer Hara works. Today it tells you do this. Tomorrow it tells you do that. And the next day it tells you go worship idols. It's a very famous Gemara. What it means is the Yetzer Hara doesn't come to a person one day who's following a straight path and say, go off the straight path. He comes to him and says, do this a little bit out of line. Then tomorrow comes and says, do another little thing out of line, a little bit more. And that's why we know as a rule that we have to be strong and make sure not to make that first wrong step. If you make the first wrong step, it leads to another wrong step, and another wrong step until Chas v'Shalom, the person finds themselves far away from where they're supposed to be. I think this from the Alter Rebbe once said, when a person gets lost, in those days people were riding on a horse or wagon, today it's with a car. Let's say you get lost and you look on the map and you're shocked to find out you're 100 miles away from your destination, 100 miles away from where you're supposed to be. How did you get there? You weren't standing here and suddenly you're 100 miles away. First you were 10 feet away, then you were 20 feet away because you took the wrong turn. And then you were 50 feet away, and then you were a mile away, and then 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. As you're going down the wrong highway, eventually you're 100 miles away. So it goes inch by inch, foot by foot, and mile by mile until you get there. Same thing as Baruch means. That's a simple pshat. The pshat that the Friedrich Rebbe gives like this, not the Yetzer Hara comes to you and says, do a little Aveirah. Just a little tiny Aveirah, little one, not so bad. You know, it was hot today. You're tired, you're not in a good mood, just give in, relax. That's one Yetzer, that's a simple pshat. This Yetzer Hara, the way the Friedrich Rebbe explains it, comes and says, do mitzvah, do it. He tells you to do the mitzvah and don't do the Aveirah. In fact, it makes so much sense and it tells you why it makes sense. So what's wrong with that? It's because today he tells you do this because it makes sense. Tomorrow he tells you do that because it makes sense. The third day he comes and tells you do this because it makes sense. To the point that you become conditioned that whatever you do, you need the consent of the Yetzer Hara that it makes sense. You don't think it's the Yetzer Hara, you think it's me. Oh, it's very good, it makes sense. But you get sort of used to the idea that my doing, it depends on making sense. Then one day it comes to something that doesn't make sense, and that's when it gets me, because it doesn't make sense. I've already been conditioned, whatever I do has to make sense. That's what it means. The Yetzer Hara comes along and says, hey, kach. So again, when we learn and we understand, but we are doing it not because it makes sense. We're doing it because nasa, unconditional commitment. We're learning it and understanding it in order to internalize it to the deepest depth that we can. Yes, Shane.
How's it different of like doing it because it doesn't, like doing it whether or not it makes sense, and an angel who does it just like it seems like if an angel's doing it for absolutely no reason and like not because it makes sense, sounds like that we're supposed to do the same thing. No, we're not angels. We have a brain, but we're not supposed
No,
to.
an angel has no challenge to make that kind of commitment. He was programmed to make that commitment. We have a choice to make that commitment or that commitment. And the proof we have the choice is because there's at least 2-3 people in the world that didn't make that choice, right? So obviously we have the choice. And therefore, when we make that commitment because of choice, that's our advantage over the angels. We have free choice. There's one more concept I'm going to try. This is a little bit more subtle, a little bit deeper, but let me try to explain a little bit. And that is, I mentioned that there's 3 crowns. Okay, so what are the third? Nasa is one, Nishma is the other, and the third is Nasa before Nishma. But there are Maimorim that I put it down here at number 40, especially in the Rebbe's Maimorim, we find this quite a bit, that even if a person submits himself to Hashem completely, there's 2 possibilities. One is where you submit yourself to Hashem's Ratzon, to Hashem's will, which is beautiful. The other one is not only to Hashem's will, but you submit yourself to Baal Ratzon, which means to the master of the will, the one who wants the thing to be done. What does that mean? Basically, it means that after that, Hashem gave us the Torah, gave us the mitzvahs, and now we're committed to do these things. We know this is right, and I'm committed to them because it's right. On a deeper level, it's everything we do, even the mitzvahs that we do because it's right. It's not just because the mitzvah, but because there's a commander that commanded the mitzvahs, and we're connecting to him. I'll give you an example of how this might play out. There's a famous story with the 2 brothers, Rabbi Melech and Rabbi Zusha. Before they became known tzaddikim, they would travel and they would disguise themselves as ordinary people, homeless people, and they went from community to community, and through doing that, they would meet a lot of people and bring a lot of people to do tshuva. Nobody knew who they were. And sometimes they got into trouble because of that. People suspected, accused them of doing things. And that's what happened in one place, that they were accused, or someone accused them of stealing something, and they were both arrested, they're both in jail. So one of the brothers looked at the other brother, and I'm not sure which one, and said to the other brother, "You look down. Why do you look so down for?" So he says, "What do you expect me to feel? I'm here in the jail. And in those days, they didn't have a plumbing system that we have today. So they had a bucket, and that's what they used there for a bathroom." And he says, in this room, you can't daven, you can't put on tefillin, you can't make brachas, you can't even learn Torah. So how can I not be down? So the other brother says to him, but the truth of the matter is that who's the one that told you that you're not allowed to do all these things? Hashem. Who's the one that put us into this room? Hashem. So by being in this room and not davening and not learning and not putting on film, we're fulfilling Hashem's wish. So we should be happy that we're doing what Hashem wants. And the other brother says, wow, you're right. And he puts his hand on his shoulder, he puts his hand on his shoulder, both start dancing. And all the non-Jews in the jail start clapping their hands, everybody's screaming, and the guard rushes in, what's going on here? What's all this commotion about? And Baruch says, you see that bucket over there with all the garbage? That's where the commotion is coming from. Yeah, I'm going to take it out. He took the bucket, took it out of the room. Baruch Hashem, now we can daven, now we can put on film, now we can learn. So what's the story here? The story is that the commitment, if the commitment is to the tefillin, to the mezuzah, how could you ever be happy if you can't put on the tefillin? Which makes sense. You're not supposed to be happy, chas v'sholom. But to be on such a level, to be b'simcha, because I recognize Hashem put me in this situation, and that's what He wants right now, and therefore I'm b'simcha, that means you're connecting to the source of the mitzvah, not just the mitzvah itself. Again, this is a very deep concept, and there's one of the most beautiful sikhs of the Rebbe on the subject of Matan Torah is there's two opinions in amongst the Tanoim. When the Eibishter gave the Aseres HaDibros, how did he even respond? In other words, the Aseres HaDibros has positive commandments and negative commandments. So Hashem said, keep Shabbos. How did they respond? Then Hashem said, do not steal. How did they respond? So one opinion says, for the positive things, they all shouted yes. For the negative things, they all shouted no. Yes means we'll do it. No means, right, we won't do it. There's another opinion that says, no, for everything Hashem said, they said yes. Big deal. They said this, they said that. It's a Gemara, and two sages are arguing whether it was yes for everything or it was yes for some things and no for other things. What's going on over here? What is this big issue? I would love to learn the Sikh inside. It's a very beautiful Sikha. But the Nikuda of the Sikha is that when you say yes for a positive commandment and you say no for the negative commandment, even though this is Nasa v'Nishma, unconditional commitment, but you're committing yourself to the mitzvah. And that's why for this, it's yes. That's a no mitzvah, so I'm saying no. The fact that they said yes for everything meant that they committed themselves to the commander of the mitzvah, and therefore everything is yes. It doesn't make a difference whether it's a mitzvah to do, a mitzvah to withhold from doing. All these details are irrelevant because I'm connecting to the source of the mitzvah, which is the commander of the mitzvah, and therefore it's yes for everything. I'm connecting to the commander. Many more examples that can be brought out. I mean, let's say a person's in a situation, I would think would be also an example of a person, let's say let's use the example from Hayom Yom, the famous story. The famous story with the daughter-in-law of the Tzemach Tzedek, who was also the wife and Rebbetzin of the Rebbe Marash, Rebbetzin Rivka. The story that she was sick, and the doctor told her that she has to eat before davening, and she didn't want to, so she got up an hour earlier, davened earlier, and then she ate after davening. But she ate the same time that she eats every day. But it wasn't good because she slept less. Right? Everybody knows the story. And what happened? Tzemach Tzedek found out she actually became weaker. Tzemach Tzedek called her in and said the Torah was given to a person you to be healthy. And therefore you have to be healthy and you have to eat before davening because that's how you're going to be healthy. And then he added, and you have to do it b'simcha. I'm talking about the last words. How could you do something b'simcha if you're doing something against what you're really supposed to be doing? Or take this to a similar situation. It's Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, and you're supposed to fast. And chas v'shalom, a person's in a situation where the doctor says you're not allowed to fast, and he has to eat. Do it b'simcha. How could you do b'simcha? I'm eating on Yom Kippur. And the answer is, if Hashem put me in this situation, for whatever reason known to him, and Hashem is telling me, I want you to eat today, it should be the same simcha like when I'm doing the opposite. I'm not eating on Yom Kippur, if that's what I need to do. So that's when I'm connecting, and I'm making the connection, not just to Hashem's commandments, but to the commander himself. Naturally, if I'm committed to the commander, I'm committed to the commandments. But this is a deeper commitment. It's to the commander himself. Okay, let's move on to number 41. Another subject that's found in Torah, and that is the pasuk which says Cherus al haluchis. I'm sure you want to see where this is in the Chumash. So you can turn the page to page 64 in the booklet. And it's here. Oops, that's not in the Chumash, that's in, that's actually in Pirkei Avos. But look at page 63a, one page before that, 63a, on top of the page, pasuk in Kisisok, V'halucha is Ma'aseh Elokim Hema, the two tablets were the work of Hashem. The writing was Hashem. Hashem himself wrote the luchos. But what does it say? Chorus ala luchos, engraved upon the luchos. So he had this stone, it was a sapphire stone, and Hashem engraved the letters of the Seres HaDibros in the luchos themselves. So the question is, why? We know the way we have a Torah today is that it's parchment, and there is ink on parchment. The only exception is the luchos. The luchos was stone, and the letters were engraved in the stone. And by the way, mizeh u'mizeh hein ksuvim. What does that mean? This is Chazal say that it means not only the letters were engraved in the stone, but there's two ways to engrave a letter in stone. One is it's engraved in the stone and you see the stone there. The other is that you engrave it through and through, both sides. And one of the miracles were that they were able to read it from this side and read it from the other side. Normally, when you do that, through and through, on one side it's straight, on the other side, the letters are the opposite, the reverse. Over here, from both sides, they read it straight, but it was engraved through and through, which means it was just air. There was no stone where the letters are. That's why the Gemara says that the letter Mem, final Mem, and the Samach were in the luchos miraculously because there was nothing connecting them to the stone because everything was through and through. Why did Hashem make that the luchos should be engraved? Why not the way we have a Sefer Torah today? Hashem could have made a huge piece of parchment, should be written with ink on the parchment. Anech Hashem Elokecha. Why was it that this was an exception? What is the difference? So generally speaking, the Rebbe explains it is there's two things. One thing, the way it's explained in the spiritual realm, the heavenly realm, and the other the way it's explained how it applies to us in Avodah. So first we'll talk about the way it is spiritually. The difference between letters that are written on parchment and letters that are engraved is that letters that are written on parchment, the ink, which means the letters, and the parchment are two separate things. First there was parchment, and then there were letters. There are two separate entities. Then we dipped the pen into the ink, and we wrote a letter on the parchment. Now the letter and the parchment are one, but in essence, they're two separate things. When you engrave letters in a stone, there's no two things. There's only stone there. The stone itself is formed into an aleph. The stone is formed into a base, but there's nothing there besides stone. There's no other substance. Now, when you engrave, there's also two possibilities. One is that you engrave it normally, and then there's no ink, but there's potential to put ink on it. The other one, when you make it through and through, there's not even potential to put any ink because there's only air. That means that the oneness between the letters and the stone is absolute. In the first case, when you engrave it, there are letters that are one with the stone, but there's a potential that there'll be something here that'll be separate from the stone. There's potential to pour ink on it, and it'll be ink on stone. But when it's through and through, there's not even potential for any kind of other form of letters. The letters are absolutely one with the stone, and the stone is one with the letters. What this means, basically, again, in the spiritual element, it says in Tanya that the Torah is from Hashem. It's Chachmasa or Hashem's wisdom. Now, we learned the other day, when we talked about the difference between learning Torah properly or not properly, is that unfortunately, there are people that they learn Torah, but they perceive it more as something academic, which means the way the Torah is presented to us here on planet Earth is wisdom, logic, seichel. And you don't necessarily see that it's one with Hashem. You see it as something intellectual. But initially, the way the Torah is up there in the spiritual realm, it's Chachmasai or it's Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is absolutely one with Hashem. It's only like everything else. It goes through a process of tzimtzum, that the real essence of it becomes hidden. So then outwardly, it appears to be as if the Torah is independent of Hashem. It's just logic, academic stuff like science, math, and anything else in the world of intellect. But in essence, and in that, there are two levels. There's one level where the Torah is one with Hashem, but there's already the potential that it could become something independent and separate. And there's a higher level where the Torah is absolutely one with Hashem. It's Torah and Hashem is one essence, inseparable. And that's the true essence of Torah. So when we learn, that's what we connect to. So therefore, just like physically, the luchos is the origin. This is the source for everything. So it reflects the way the Torah is in its source. In its source, in Shamayim, the Torah and Hashem are absolutely one, inseparable. Not even potential for separation. And then later it becomes the way it is now, ink on parchment. The Rebbe always explains that how would this reflect in terms of our Avodah? Because there's also two ways that a person could learn Torah, study Torah. One way is that I learn Torah, but I and the Torah are still two separate entities. And the other way is that I learn Torah and I and Torah become one. What does that mean practically? I guess what it means is we all know that when you study Torah, it's not just knowledge. The Torah has a whole different value system. Torah is a whole different way of perceiving the world, of understanding things, way of looking at things. It's a 180-degree turn from the way a person looks at life and the world without Torah, and the way we look at life and the world with Torah. Everything changes. So there's a possibility that a person should learn Torah, and not only that, follow Torah, but still the Torah is like an added element, an added substance to me. I have my way of thinking, but this is Hashem's way of thinking, and I'm submitting myself to his way of thinking. The other possibility is that I've internalized Torah to such an extent that became me. That became that me, that I even forgot that I once used to think differently and you once used to look at things in a different way, because it became part of my essence, part of my way of perception, part of my way of the way I value things and look at things. There's a story with one of the Hasidic Rebbes, try to remember who it was, that he actually became a student of Mezritcha Magid, and later he became a Hasidic master himself. But this was the story how it started off. Before he became a Hasidic Rebbe, he was also a great person. In fact, he was brilliant in Torah, vast Torah knowledge, he knew everything by heart. And he heard about the Mezritcha Magid, and he heard some things that were positive, and then he heard some things which were questionable. So he decided, let me go to him myself and meet with him. Let's see. He comes to Mezritcha Magid, and he's this big rabbi. And he says to the Mezritcha Magid, I'd like to have a Torah discussion with you. So Mezritcha Magid said, he's busy now. You can go to the yeshiva and talk to my student Zusha. So right away, he was already offended. I mean, here's a big rav coming, and you tell him, go talk to one of my students. Okay. He was necessarily humble. He went. Comes to Rav Zusha, and he said, the Rebbe told me to come to you and have a Torah discussion. Oh, great. I'm just right now in the middle of something I don't understand. Maybe you can help me. The Gemara discusses that you need 10 men for a minyan. What if you have only 9 men? Could we use the Torah scroll that's in the Aron for a minyan? Every shul has an Aron Kodesh, and in the Aron Kodesh is a Torah scroll. Could that be the 10th? So the Gemara says, the Aron is not a person. Oh, okay, we can use it. So he said, what was the question in the first place? Why would the Gemara even think that the Aron, which is the ark, should be part of the minyan? It's not a person. So he's listening and says, yeah, good question. Never thought of it. So he said to him, the Gemara was saying the following. Here is something that is full of Torah. In fact, the Torah scroll includes everything. The whole written Torah, the whole oral Torah, everything that will be revealed after Mashiach comes, it's all in the Torah. So it's full of Torah. So maybe if it's full of Torah, we can use it for the minyan. So the Gemara says, but the ark is not a person, which means the Torah and the ark never connected. The ark has the Torah in it, but the ark still remains a piece of wood. And he's listening, and he's thinking to himself, that might be me, full of Torah, but did I change? Did I become a different person? There's another story with the Alter Rebbe, but I say next teacher is here. So we'll do that tomorrow, if I remember. And if I don't, you could remind me to tell you the story with the Alter Rebbe about this subject. You won't know what to remind me. There's a story of the Alter Rebbe which we'll talk about tomorrow. But if you remember, you remind me. And Alter Rebbe told the Chassid, what did the Torah teach you? So we'll talk about that tomorrow with Hashem. Yeah.